And thank you for joining for tonight at 21. I never thought I'd say that. It's a virtual. It's 21, a virtual celebration of life moments, and this is really an exciting night for me. I am going to keep my comments brief because I want to make sure everyone gets to see as much as you can tonight and explore and see what we've got. This event is really as close to my wedding as we're going to get. So in that line, I will similarly want to acknowledge those people who have come very far from travel from Calgary or beyond Calgary, from Fort Macleod, Alberta, Bob, from Saskatchewan. You got Ellen, Amy, Rob, Bonnie, Len, Kelly, Vicky, Mike, Penny, and Marlene. From British Columbia, Colleen, Alan, the tech guy you would have talked to, Brady, Tim, Judy, Shelley, Marilyn, and Keith. Amanda, Chris, and Jim. From Ontario, Lori, and from Los Angeles, Brant. And I'm not going to mention their last names because I expect everybody to introduce yourselves after this. Tonight would not be possible without many people. Several of you were helping even earlier today and probably will be helping later tonight as well. But Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, especially Lauren and her group of volunteers that you would have seen when you came in the door and that you would see at these tables here. Alan for helping me with the recording those writings. Shelley for doing edits, light edits, because she knows more than I do on the writing. Ken Chow is here, and he was involved with the all the photography, contributing to the visuals and the replicas. Brad Henninger is here to do some more photography. Crescent Point Energy, wow, what have they done? It's amazing. They donated this gorgeous space. And delicious food and drinks, volunteers, security, flowers, everything. Ken Lamont, and especially Blake and Janice. And I can't really say anything more than Tasha. And you all know who she is, but she's been working on this for months and years, really. So I'm just gonna. So lastly, what I wanted to do was to share what this 21 thing is. Firstly, it is not an art show. It is not an art show. There are a few posters or replicas that you're going to be able to see if you wanted to take some home as a memory of tonight. But the visuals, the writings, and words you will see and hear are not meant to be. They're not meant to be all lovely. They are actually meant to be ugly, some of them, and I hope that you don't like several of them. They are just truthful. That's what they are. 21 is simply an experience of sharing life events. Things that all of us here feel, we experience, we love, we laugh, we cry about in this little ride that we get to go on as humans. And I decided to share some of my experiences with my people and hope that similarly my people will share a bit of their own potent lives. So that's what 21 years ago, 21 years ago today, on June 21st, 1997, I started on this path with cancer, and I am still here along with, still doing this journey, which is I wasn't sure that I would actually get to share this tonight with you. I started thinking of these moments many, many years ago, and long before my like I say, the Lord of the Rings story that I have, which I'm kind of tired of telling, but you know, that was, I started to think about this idea of just sharing the life moments that we all understand, and what that would do and what could come from it. So what I want you to do tonight is to look at the visuals and respond to them. Read, or better yet, listen, if you can figure out how to do that techie version, writings or the recordings, to hear a bit about my context to the visuals. And then I want to have you look at them again and think of your own context and what it means to you. Share that with people. Share that with others. Meet others. Everyone here in this room is connected to me some way. So I really would like you to share share with those people. It's why I've shared my context. So I really encourage you to do the same. Again, enjoy the evening. And thank you so much for coming to 21.
During the 2 weeks in ICU in the summer of 2006, I used various strategies to stay present in the room, to focus away from the pain that I felt and stay conscious. Some of them were from my NYC Theatre Company classes, where we would warm up before putting up scenes by lying on the floor and visualizing colors and numbers. You concentrate on seeing the number 1 in a specific color, then you move to 2 in another color, repeating until you reach 11, then coming back down one by one to 1. All this concentrating helped remove my focus from the pain of the hole in my neck and chest, the frustration of the tube in my throat, oxygen in my nose, and inability to communicate. After several days of this, I was just too tired to keep repeating the exercises, so I just laid there. After a few minutes, I felt like I melted into a warm pool of butter, like the delicious butter you get aside lobster or crab. This pool of butter that I became was incredible. While there are no words that truly describe how amazing it felt, peaceful, sublime, tranquil, calm, serene come to mind. It was quite possibly the most wonderful feeling I've ever experienced. I was very tempted to remain there in the butter, but something made me think of the exercises and the life that they had been helping me and keeping me focused on. Somehow, I managed to focus back on them. The butter evaporated, and I returned to the room, to the beeping sounds of the machines, the tubes in my mouth and nose, and the pain. Ever since the experience with the butter, I do not fear the moment of death. My only fear is not doing the things I want to before the butter comes. From the beginning, when I first started chemo many years ago, people always wanted to know how you feel when doing treatment. And besides the tangible descriptions of nausea, fatigue, headache, or hair loss, there is an overwhelming cloud-like haze that swarms you. As I'm a visual person, I have often described the difficult to describe feeling of chemo as the gray. Of course, I used that before the infamous shades of gray came into common vocabulary. I'm almost certain that it is nothing like those shades, but I can honestly say that I've never read the book or seen the movie, so it is an unfounded conclusion. Shades are still relevant, however. Some days the gray is light, barely noticeable, just a general feeling of unwell, like when you're coming down with something. On its own, relatively tolerable. It's when sheets of gray start to gather and layer, become a bit more heavy, dragging you down, sucking the energy out of you, that they become more than just a nuisance, but instead an attack. Everything just seems worse than the hour before. Both the mind and the body are pinned down, and even the spirit is unable to pull the other two out of the thick fog. What I hate the most about the gray is the awareness of being in it. You know you're in it, you know that it's temporary, but you can't seem to get a spot out of the foggy windows to make an exit. You have to go to the washroom, but you're so tired that you wait 15 minutes longer than your bladder can handle before managing to get up and walk in there. The key to managing the gray, regardless of where it comes from or what shade it is just to accept it. No judgment of your inability to resolve it. Sounds simple, but it takes a lot of practice and control. Sleep, rest, and do what you can until it passes. The gray is simply just the excess of something darker inside you spilling out. So it is necessary to let the gray pass so whatever's in there can get out. While I would agree with people who say that I'm a positive person and that my ability to stay positive has helped me overcome many challenges, I feel the need to articulate the depth of moments where it is impossible to be positive, or where I have just felt simply too tired to live. Through the past 21 years, I have felt that way, too tired to fight, too tired to live, many times. I share this because I believe it is the life reality that every person experiences, but we are encouraged to reject it, recover from it, change it, and most definitely not share it with others. Be strong, think positively, be grateful. And while that is so very true, actually respecting the worst moments, hours, days of life, where we feel weakened, when we feel attacked, unable to go on, swallowed by the quicksand, gasping for air, blinded by the horror of whatever is devouring us, is the only way to improve at getting through those times. I used to believe, or possibly hope, that life was overall fair, that times of darkness would be equaled by times of light, that justice would be served, not necessarily immediately, but by the end of it, the fact would be balanced out. I don't believe that to be true anymore. Life is not logical or fair. There are tornadoes and sharks and tsunamis, regardless of what we do or don't do. And it is almost certain that we or those we love will be hurt multiple times, sometimes so badly that we almost don't make it. It's never safe to assume that we had our fair share of those attacks and expect that it will eventually dissipate. I don't think that's how it works. It doesn't make sense, but that's the point. I think shining the light, the spotlight, on the darkest moments, understanding in detail how we managed to get to the edge of the water we almost drowned in, how we didn't bleed to death, how our heart managed to heal after being torn to pieces, makes us capable of surviving the next hit, no matter how many times we are hit. And focusing on how black the black is makes the white even extraordinarily more vibrant. My dad said that when he first saw my neck and chest after surgery to remove the flesh-eating disease, he cried on and off for a few hours. The first time I saw the wound, via a Polaroid picture taken by the wound care clinic technician about 3 months after the initial surgery, I thought it looked like I'd been attacked by an animal. Everyone had been saying about how good it looked, but to me, it was horrific. I knew why Dad had wept in the early days. It's an absolute miracle that I survived the flesh-eating disease. So the leftover wound and scar have to be tolerated with respect. That said, it's been an endless wound that has been a royal pain in my ass for about 11 years. It was on its way to fully healing after a few releases of the scar by my plastic surgeon, but after I fell backwards in circa 2009, the skin graft fell apart, and it's been somewhat open ever since. While it looks angry and sore, it actually doesn't hurt. It looks worse than it feels. It costs more than it feels as well. The expensive silicone bandages needed every day for years to ensure the skin around the reopened area was not damaged or not covered under any health plan or deductible as a health expense for tax purposes. It's kind of ridiculous given the bandages are for something I had no control over, not elective surgery, but flesh-eating disease, likely from infection of my central line, which was inserted for leukemia. Really? In the fall of 2017, the doctors made an ambitious but failed attempt to insert a port in the midst of all the battered tissue. It traumatized the wound a bit, and it again changed shape, depth, and color. What I find most interesting is that when I created this painting of the wound and scar, it's actually turned out kind of beautiful. I suppose that's the inner beauty of the wound, a natural tattoo that proves how truly resilient I am. The wound never totally heals. It changes over time, tearing, bleeding, scabbing, and healing again. It's kind of like me. I didn't know what the word qi meant until I was introduced to Dr. Stephen Ung in 2008. I was waiting for my third transplant protocol to be approved by Health Canada, trying to get strong and prepare for hopefully what was to come. Within a 48-hour period, I had 3 different friends who didn't know each other mention Dr. Ung's name to me as someone I should see. He was a doctor in Edmonton who had received the Order of Canada for his work as both a Western medicine doctor and a Qigong master. It was strange to hear the same name coming from 3 different people in 3 different directions, so I tried to listen. I signed up for his Calgary Qigong workshop. At the workshop, Dr. Ung walked us through several concentration exercises where we focused on moving energy through meridians in our body to remove blockages. It sounds somewhat intangible, as you are not doing anything that is observable, but I learned that meridians are like little maps in our body that have been traveled on for centuries in Eastern medicine. And if we can focus our mind properly, we can move our energy like a little ball of warm light through the paths, clearing unwanted items that stand in our way. There are very specific methods to do this clearing, and certain breathing and concentration processes that target unwanted items specifically. My description is likely inevitable for a centuries-old practice, but basically I came to realize that the mind, body, and spirit were incredibly powerful when working together. Post-transplant number 3, I used Qigong to help resolve possibly fatal typhlitis, which is an infection where the large intestine meets the small intestine, with my own focus on, as well as requesting for others to send red and white in energy. I just looked up the definition of qi, which I understood to be energy. According to the Oxford Dictionary, qi is the circulating life force whose existence and properties are the basis of much Chinese philosophies and medicine. I'll admit, I'm not as diligent now with practicing Qigong as I should be. Perhaps in creating this visual and writing, I will be reminded of what benefits are possible with the daily 10-minute it takes to do the small circle exercise and get back to it. One exercise I learned and continue to do regularly is kind of a meditation and visualization where I breathe into and thank each of my organs for all the work that they do. I learned that each organ has a color. Lungs and large intestine are white, heart and small intestine red, liver green, pericardium, which is the sac around the heart, violet, kidneys blue, and stomach, gallbladder, and spleen yellow. It's kind of energizing to spend a few minutes being thankful for the resilience of my organs, who maintain their color despite being repeatedly hit by all the treatments over 21 years. Together, they really are remarkable, kind of a superhero life force. My friendship with NYC began before my roller coaster ride with cancer started. After listening all my life to my mom talk, or rather bubble, about NYC like it was some magical place not on this earth, breakfast at Tiffany's, the Plaza Hotel, I finally said when I was about 20, we should go there. I recall the look of panic and excitement on her face at the suggestion. So in 1994, we did it. We prepared, we studied the maps, paper then, and we planned so that we would arrive, we wouldn't look like tourists, not be targeted by being mugged, and never get lost. Within 3 hours of landing at LaGuardia, we were walking in front of Rockefeller Center when a couple handed us tickets to some new show at NBC Studios that they couldn't attend, the Conan O'Brien show. An hour later, we were in the studio laughing at this unknown comic's jokes, applauding when the signs directed us to. That was the beginning. We both knew this trip was not a one-time bucket list item. We were addicted. We made another, more focused and jam-packed trip in 1995. After my initial diagnosis in 1997, I recall saying to Mom as the medical team rolled me into the radiology room to insert the central line into my chest, which is a fancy triple lumen catheter that it helps deliver chemo, takes a pokeless blood draw, and administers other fluids all at the same time. If I survive this, we're going back to New York and we're staying at the Plaza. I closed my eyes during the insertion and visualized the twinkling lights of Manhattan from a table at the 65th floor Rainbow Promenade, where a costly drink is the price of admission. In 1998, we returned. Didn't stay at the Plaza, but certainly a nicer hotel. Every 6 months or year following that, through another relapse, transplant, and recovery, we visited our friend, got our fix of NYC energy and life. In June 2005, I got a call from my coach at PwC about a limited time offer to join and lead a project in our global head office, 300 Madison Avenue. I jumped at the dream opportunity, and by the fall, I was living on the 34th floor of the Upper East Side with my own view of the twinkling lights. My time living in Manhattan was like NYC is, potent and intense. Working a lot, acting, made it into a theater company through an audition secured from a random conversation with a stranger in a restaurant. Living a lot, eating a lot, drinking a fair bit. The energy of the city made up for the lack of sleep and rest. It's hard to sit and do nothing when you know probably a block away there's 5 things happening that are amazing. Beyond energy, NYC also literally saved my life. My untimely second relapse with leukemia popped up in July 2006 and rudely interrupted my plan to spend that weekend in the Hamptons with friends. After surviving the flesh-eating disease and its effects in Calgary, I returned to NYC in summer 2007. My NYC doctors, puzzled by my resilience, shared information about a new clinical trial for relapsed leukemia patients. After some tough decisions, legal gymnastics, and a lot of work by Dr. Brown and Tom Baker in Calgary and Dr. Young in Memorial Sloan Kettering MSK in NYC, 8 months later, on June 12, 2008, I had an unprecedented third transplant using MSK's experimental protocol and once again my brother's cells. Things on the leukemia front have been quiet ever since. The annual trips have continued, even in a wheelchair in 2017, and have included attending MSK's annual Thrivership event for their bone marrow transplant patients and family friends. It's like the song says, in New York, concrete jungle where dreams are made of, there's nothing you can't do. Big lights will inspire you. Let's hear it for New York, New York, New York. I discovered Maui when I was 14 on 2 family trips in the late 1980s. I'll never forget the moment when I stepped off the plane to be hugged by the humid, orchid-smelling, and very perfect air. It's something that is better experienced than explained. If NYC saved my life, then Maui restored it. My parents and I had planned a trip, my first return since the late 80s, for January 2007. When the summer of 2006 exploded, we knew that the trip would be squashed. As my stability slowly evolved through the fall, we considered sticking to the original plan. In January 2007, we navigated the Vancouver airport, trying to make our connection. Mom running and pushing me in a wheelchair could have been a scene right out of The Amazing Race, but we made it. On our first trip down to the beach, I couldn't get onto the sand without help from my parents. But once there, the crashing waves, blue sky, warmth of the sun, and the occasional sand crab tirelessly digging out his home merged into some magical, healing energy. I could sit for hours without even flipping a page on my book and be content. The waves kept luring me in. Growing up, I used to play water polo and did synchronized swimming, so my legs are strong and I'm not afraid of the water. It wasn't long before I caught my first wave boogie boarding. And after riding it in, all the way in, I used the board to help me get onto my knees and then stand, turn around, and walk back out to catch another one. It was pure bliss to play on my own with the ocean, to truly be alive. Mom and I walked down the beach, did some people watching, and took in the scenery. I snorkeled with Dad, and we enjoyed incredible moments with sea life. The ocean is another world. Sounds are amazing, fish and coral mesmerizing. The turtles clearly have been here longer, a lot longer than us humans, and you can almost taste their wisdom. I recall meeting one and just floating with him, having a staring contest, just being, peace. 3 weeks after beach physio and turtle treatment, supplemented by delicious food, drinks, and island hospitality, my happy hour list is almost famous, really accelerated my recovery. By the time we left the island, I could get onto all fours and stand up on the beach on my own. With sunset around 6 p.m. and a 3-hour time change, we played card games when it got dark until we could barely keep our eyes open, around 8:30 p.m. Before the cards, we'd watch the sunset on our balcony. The wind always died down, the temperature became nearly unnoticeable, and the palm trees transformed into silhouettes standing proudly against a golden sky. Perfect air. Chaos is defined in the dictionary as, quote, complete disorder and confusion, end quote. It pops up in our brain unexpectedly throughout life. About 11 months after my mastectomy surgery, I had an ultrasound to check a spot that I had noticed on my chest. It's normal to find an unusual thickness or abnormality after such a significant amount of tissue is removed. It could be scar tissue or just the general change in the chest's shape from soft and round breasts to a desert of the occasional muscle winding through. The test was booked so we could cross off anything problematic and move forward. The very young technician went about her work with the gooey wand and tried to navigate my desert chest with care. She paused and asked me, "When did you notice this spot?" "About 3 weeks ago," were the words that came out, while my brain started a few cartwheels, wondering why was she asking this and what was she seeing. She told me she needed to talk to her supervisor and left the room. I lay there in the dark, the cold goo on my chest, and start to turn my mind to the suspended ceiling above. The common white ceiling tiles that you find in most healthcare rooms, blocks of fiber suspended between metal strips, speckles with what seems like random marks. What I have learned over the years of being in this position, staring up at them, waiting for some important and possibly awful news to return to the room, is that there is actually a pattern to these tiles. It often takes a bit of time to find the pattern, but I've gotten pretty good at it with practice. I scan quickly for a more common or obvious group of speckles, something I can identify the shape of or a pattern, and then I race around the rest of the block searching for a similar set of speckles. Once I think I've recognized one, I examine the neighboring speckles and see if the neighbors match like the other ones do. The analysis shifts the brain from the chaos it is thrown into to a treasure hunt of the ceiling. A safe game to play instead of swirling in the scary disarray of unanswered questions. When the radiologist entered the room with the technician, she quickly told me that there was no issue, that the spot was a rib, and I could wipe the goo, get dressed, and head home. The roller coaster was over for now. But I was angry for being thrown onto the rocky ride yet again. I felt some thin relief, like when you narrowly avoid a car collision, but somehow still feel like you were hit by something. So when I got home, I painted how I felt. Thick, rough, and broken tissue. Dark and ugly uncertainty. Chaos. If we are lucky, we can find a few silver patterns on ceiling tiles to navigate the chaos. I started Trisha's Tides in 2006, just after I survived flesh-eating disease. It isn't a blog like many other are these days. I haven't become a social media celebrity from it. It was, however, a very easy way to update a lot of people on how I was doing with minimal effort. The first post was my dad's, his journal he kept while I was in the hospital, so that he could update his 13 siblings and several other worried family members and friends. Once I was stable enough I started posting my own updates for people who wanted to know. They could read, they could comment, sign the guest book, all from a safe, germ-free distance from me. Or if they didn't want to, they didn't have to. A significant benefit over the alternative of emails and calls. Over the 10 plus years since starting the blog, I posted over 160 times, over 700 words in those blog titles, which I found out when I created this doodle visual. Almost daily before and after my third transplant, and sometimes months would go by without a post. Usually no news was good news. Some of my posts were health updates, many were positive, some were not. Most shared a little bit of the learning and perspective I gained in the previous weeks. But the one constant was the energy I received from comments, guest book entries, and just people telling me I read your blog. The invisible love that I felt from this is difficult to describe or measure. Combined with the prayers, thoughts, beads, love that were sent and continue to be sent from friends of friends and family of family, I can only describe that even in my worst and darkest moments in my 21 years of this roller coaster, I have felt what I describe like being in a bubble of energy. Not a bubble like one you blow with liquid soap through a wand. Not a bubble like you can blow with Hubba Bubba chewing gum. More like a thin but strong, soft, warm, beanbag bubble. Like one you can lie on, fall into, or roll off of as you need to. Not available online. The impact of 2 decades of treatments and complications has not surprisingly taken a toll on my physical state. Scars from the craniotomy, mastectomy, and flesh-eating disease surgeries, the skin graft covering the damage left from the flesh-eating disease, scleroderma, muscle wasting, balance problems, neuropathy, numbness in my feet and hands, loss of hair, hearing, and vision have all left a mark. However, even today, people often tell me how good I look. I credit these compliments to medicine, the power of a positive attitude, but also to parts. It's amazing what is now available to hide the physical effects of 2 decades of battling cancer. Exceptional wigs, effective makeup, laser eye surgery, reading glasses, walking cane and portable wheelchair, barely visible hearing aids, silicone neck bandages, stylish flat shoes, prosthetic breasts, and creative scarves all help transform a person into looking healthy. It's like the same phenomena that transforms Mr. Potato Head from a bald carbohydrate into a lively, charismatic guy. While I know beauty is not skin deep, and I really shouldn't worry about what the outside looks like, the reality is, cancer or no cancer, if you look normal, you feel more like yourself. And feeling more like yourself when you are standing in quicksand is a powerful thing. You can feel stronger and motivated to help yourself defy some pretty crazy odds. No sympathetic look from strangers, which can be pretty exhausting in itself. Like everyone, some days I'm too tired to put on my parts, and I'm happy to just rest and be a bald potato. I know people love me just the same. But if I want to, I can put on all my parts and disappear for a moment in the normal, lively, and charismatic crowd. Finding out who donated bone marrow, technically stem cells, to you is similar to adopting. Both parties have to agree to connect and how much information to share. Countries determine how long you have to wait until you can connect. 2 years after my second transplant, I completed the required paperwork and was told my donor's name, address, and email address. Oliver Bosch was from a small town in the Bavaria region of Germany. It seemed impossible to imagine what to say to a perfect nameless stranger who had literally saved my life. Nevertheless, I crafted a letter, had it translated, and sent it off. Eventually, we connected by email, and Oliver sent me a photo of himself while donating, hooked up to the familiar apheresis machine that we'd seen while Brandon donated. Smiling, wearing jeans, and appearing healthy and happy. Quite incredible to see. He was married, had 2 young boys, and worked in the local brewery where he led crafting of the right inputs for varieties of delicious beer. I wanted to say thank you in person. In 2010, Mom and I flew into Munich, took a train north through Bavaria to meet Oliver and stay with him and his family for the weekend. To prepare, I had my Speedy German booklet, practicing a few sentences and words. On the ride up, I started to second-guess myself, thinking of possibly bad scenarios. Perhaps he would be worried that I wanted more from him. Perhaps it would be too awkward for the weekend. Perhaps. Today, I can close my eyes and think of the trains slowing and seeing the people on the platform through the window. There was a tall, handsome, smiling man with a cute boy who looked like Jack and Davis, holding a large sunflower. I knew that his son Noah was about 4 years old, and leaving the train, I was overwhelmed with emotion as we walked towards them. All my preparation left me. All I could say was Danke. We were greeted at their beautiful Bavarian home in Oettingen of Bayern by his wife Judith and their younger son Jonah, standing on the doorstep. A drawing of a Canadian flag, a red balloon, and "Welcome Tricia" sign were created. Oliver and Judith spoke limited but good English, far better than my German-speaking abilities. We managed to communicate with no major issues for the first few hours after we arrived. Judith's close friend Claudia joined us a few hours later and proved to be a perfect translator and another friend to us. She was married with 2 boys of her own, who were a bit older than Noah and Jonah. She ran a business teaching English to various ages of people and was really gifted to keeping our conversation going despite the language gap. The weekend flew by with Judith's delicious food and our incredible conversations filling the days and nights. All of my fears of various scenarios evaporated as this amazing family welcomed us into their home and their lives. It was like I'd known them all my life. Oliver became my donor because a call came out in their community for potential donors for a boy who had leukemia and needed a transplant. Oliver registered and eventually was called about making his donation to me. Unfortunately, the boy did not survive. Oliver later sent a letter to the boy's parents, offering condolences, but informing them that because of their son, a woman in Canada was alive. Oliver also felt passionately that as part of the preparation for Germans' required term of service with the military, every person should be added to the registry. Even if they matched, people would still have the opportunity to decline, but the numbers of potential donors for people would obviously increase. A very noble man, an incredible family, good friends, beautiful sunflowers. Many of you know that I love art, and particularly a Jackson Pollock style of art. Large canvases with thick and plentiful splatters of paint layered on top of each other. Some splatters obvious, and some just a little drop, barely noticeable. Abstract enough that it is hard to articulate why it is a masterpiece. I believe that we are all canvases walking around in life, and the degree to which we engage the moments of life determines how potent our canvas becomes. Our friends, family, and experiences color our own masterpiece. Even a few years of my life looks like a full, diverse, and powerful combination. A purple heart from Tasha's friendship, multiple green, blue, and black smears from the love of my parents, brother, and nephews, along with thousands of splatters from so many other family, friends, random people, and moments. It matters not how big the paint splatter is. Saying a few words to a stranger in an elevator, traveling to places we dream of that we really can't afford, or really talking to our family and friends when we see them, contributes to the potency of our life. Time is not as important as making bold and interesting choices. We can be a Jackson Pollock in a few short years, or have a very blank canvas after 85 years. What is wonderful is that we get to choose what our canvas will look like, regardless of the life circumstances that surround us. I'm planning to be my own version of a Jackson Pollock. Since 2003, I have attended survivor events several times each year. Not cancer survivor events, but instead related to the TV show Survivor. If you have watched the show, you'll likely recognize the aerial view of a reward or immunity challenge. If you haven't seen the show, this will all sound likely a little bit ridiculous. My 3 survivor friends and I have had a pool for the past 15 years, including a plaque detailing the winner. We have a strict and consistent method to draft contestants that involves rolling special dice to determine picking order for each round and stealing. We share weekly emails as we watch the season, trash-talking and lamenting about our contestant picks. Finally, we watch the final episode together and witness which of us wins bragging rights and a coveted spot on our plaque. As soon as the following season is announced, we schedule the next draft and start the fun again. I had just recovered from my first relapse from leukemia when we started the pool. Through multiple relapses, transplants, breast cancer, and brain metastases, we somehow managed to keep our survivor fun going. Even in 2006, post-ICU, my friends sent printed competitor bios to my hospital room so my mom could hold them up for me for my consideration, to which I'd nod or shake my head, and they'd be included in the draft. A few years ago, my cousin managed to secure 4 tickets to the live finale in Los Angeles. My survivor friends and I spent a spectacular weekend in LA, staying at the Chateau Marmont, dining amongst celebrities, and enjoying a limo ride to the live finale. We got to show our plaque to producer Mark Burnett, who quite enjoyed the numerous blank spots ready for future years of the show. What a weekend. In 2017, while in hospital after surgery, my same LA cousin sent me a video that Jeff Probst, the host of the show, made for me while he was in Fiji filming the next season of Survivor. My cousin had updated Jeff on my world and how much I loved the show. In his video, Jeff shared some Survivor moments about contestants struggling with challenges, sometimes wanting to quit, but how much good resulted when they didn't. Jeff said he wanted to send a little love from Fiji to supplement the support I was getting from my family and everyone around me to keep going. It was positive energy coming from the host of my favorite show right when I was in the very darkest moments of my life. The LA weekend, my friends, enjoying some fun, and Jeff's video meant more to me than the somewhat whimsical visual shows. Survivor has been a small but important part of my fight to become the ultimate survivor. We all mourn losses in our lives. They happen. For some frequently, for others less. The form is not the focus. It is the familiar feeling when the ice floe we are standing on cracks and we must watch our former life float away. If we risk the frigid water, we will lose our life completely. In most cases, it is inevitable or unavoidable, and sometimes it is for the best. But it is always a loss of a chapter of life, no matter if the next is better or worse. It is a loss that we need to mourn, to respect, to acknowledge. If we don't, we will experience it anyway. Without notice or warning, we will be standing in an aisle at the grocery store, driving down the Deerfoot, or watching a funny movie, and suddenly we just burst into tears. I have learned through multiple diagnoses and other life events that all we can do is be aware of loss, to honor it, to respect it, but most importantly, to recognize it. No chapter can be opened without the previous one properly closed. The losses can seem small or big, but a loss of what seems small or big to others, hair, a boyfriend, a position at a job, a spouse, a friend, financial stability, health, is all certainty transformed into uncertainty without notice. In most cases, unfair. In all cases, we will survive it. We will still be standing on the ice, but the challenge will be getting used to the new view and trying not to wish for the old view to float back. I have taken steroids a few times during my battles with cancer as part of treatment to counter swelling and to counter graft versus host disease, or GVHD, otherwise known as rejection disease post-transplant. In 2003, following my second bone marrow transplant, I had to go on high doses of the steroid prednisone to address significant GVHD of my gastrointestinal tract. Within days, the GVHD backed off, and I began a slow taper off of the medication. The usual side effects with prednisone had appeared: pumpkin head, which is swelling of the face, hand tremors, difficulty sleeping. I also experienced a less common effect where my brain went on overdrive. I had incredible ideas and found myself scrawling and drafting them in my spare room at night. I could hear each instrument separately in songs, absorbing music fully and intensely. I didn't really sleep, but hovered in bed. I had almost a euphoria about how simple and straightforward the world was. It was remarkable. I quickly realized that I could only share these discoveries with my brother. He nodded with complete confidence in what I reported to him. Everybody else looked scared. One night, I went into my spare bathroom of my condo with my journal in tow, calligraphy pen posed, ready to document more incredible thoughts, when I looked up and saw a crowd of angels in front of me. I was obviously surprised. They were dressed in little white gowns, holding bells in their hands. I recognized the front row of them. It included my mom's cousin and her cousin's daughter, also a friend who I had worked with on the volunteer board of leukemia charity. There were several rows behind them, faces I didn't recognize. They were all smiling, and they nodded, laughed, and rang their bells when I asked them, "Are you angels?" When I asked about the unfamiliar faces in the back row, they said, "Oh, those are people praying for you, friends of friends," and rang their bells. They told me some truly incredible things, some amazingly good, and some terrible and scary. There was even music. Joan Osborne's "What If God Was One of Us" and George Michael's "Faith" were in the mix. I asked several times if I was going crazy, to which the angels just laughed. There was a lot of laughter. Whenever I asked or realized something that the angels liked or agreed with, they rang their bells, and the ringing in my right ear became louder. In my left ear, I heard another noise, a low buzzing. I asked, "So what is the buzzing noise I hear in my other ear?" They laughed and said, "Oh, those are the Buddhists. They are praying for you in the room next door. It sounds different than our bells, but God knows all the sounds, don't worry." And they laughed. The angels were with me until the morning, but gone once I finally fell asleep. Looking back on my time in the zone, I know that the mind and spirit are pretty powerful. If only we could all have an occasional visit from angels and Buddhists, laugh, and know that they are among us, always. I've always been close to my brother, and he's been my protector since breath one. 3 school years ahead of me, with broad swimmer shoulders, Brandon could always be counted on to scare away anyone if need be, which extended into high school. While we never attended high school at the same time, I went to an all-girls school in grade 9. I like to think his protector reputation kept my dating life to a minimum. That's my story anyway. Well, we had a few normal moments of older brother torments younger sister and vice versa. Mostly we have had a connection that is difficult to describe. We are similar and different all at the same time. We have mutual admiration for the differences we both wish we had ourselves. His ability to excel in university without even buying the course textbook and craft 20-page papers in one draft without even an outline still haunts me. Growing up, we shared quality choice of comedy. One summer, when VHS was still the preferred format, we rented, re-rented, and watched at least 40 times National Lampoon's Vacation. The only difference in our experience was that he knew all the words to the movie in one viewing, and it took me 40. When leukemia surfaced in 1997, my brother came to the hospital and was ready to take the attacker on. The inability to slam something into the wall was finally resolved when he found out he was 100% matched for bone marrow for me, despite only a 1 in 4 chance for a sibling. So he took on 4 days of big needles and flu-like symptoms and donated his stem cells on November 27, 1997, via an intravenous port inserted into his jugular vein. In 2008, he did it again for my 3rd transplant, and the leukemia has not made a sound since. In the last year, my brother has protected me as I navigated a new set of attacks against my previously best weapon, my brain. Whether it was prednisone during leukemia treatment or dexamethasone after brain surgery, my brother could recognize the changes the drugs were posing for me, even when I couldn't, and figured out strategies to convince me across some very dangerous bridges. He's the only one I trusted to share my ideas and thoughts in those very scary moments. In recent months, I have been able to do the same for him as he navigated some incredibly impossible circumstances. We know each other well, love each other without question, and can guide each other to use our minds to move from dark and scary places across to the light. While I have significant uncertainty about many things, I am absolutely certain my brother will always try to protect me. I went into the intensive care unit, ICU, in the summer of 2006 following emergency surgery to address necrotizing fasciitis, or flesh-eating disease, which was devouring my skin and tissue at a rapid pace. It had started where a stitch on my newly inserted central line had become infected. Flesh-eating disease is an intense infection for the healthiest of people. I had been hit with just 10 days into induction chemo when my immune system was intentionally obliterated. I had no neutrophils and couldn't fight a cold sore, let alone the beast of necrotizing fasciitis. The location wasn't on a limb that could be amputated, but smack in the middle of my very important organs. The ICU doctors told my parents I wouldn't be leaving ICU as they couldn't continue the leukemia treatment and my immune system couldn't handle the infection or heal from the hole the surgeon created when they removed necrotizing tissue. Anyone who has experienced or had someone close to them experience time in an ICU knows it's a difficult thing to describe in words. It's a fog of sorts, where time does not follow the normal everyday pace we've grown accustomed to. Alarm bells are constantly ringing, signaling some kind of critical danger. Some people do not remember ICU. Perhaps they are lucky. I can recall a few things vividly, but in no logical order. At the time, most of them didn't make sense, but later I was told more that put them into proper context. I was intubated, so the tube in my throat and mouth kept me alive, but I couldn't speak and felt like I had wax and cotton jammed in my mouth. I also had a feeding tube that went up my nose and into my stomach, which felt like pins up my nose. Every so often, the medical staff came in and took a marker out and tried to draw on me. Apparently, they were marking where the infection was so they could track if it was progressing or retreating. Initially, all I could do was try to stay conscious. I focused on numbers and colors over and over, like I'd learned in my warm-up exercises in my NYC Theatre Company sessions. The pain from the hole, which thankfully I couldn't see, was significant, and while the pain medication I had received was helping, it didn't totally cover it, and I felt like fog when it did. This visual contains actual scribbles and bits of my notes and attempts to communicate during that time. My mom and dad, brother, and my friend Tasha kept a 24-hour watch on me and tried to read and interpret what I was able to write. Mom posted a picture of me in my ICU room, looking normal, happy, and healthy, to remind the medical staff of the living person I was, not this septic, swollen, tubed-up body hooked up to machines. They gave me shots of GCSF, something that helps stimulate white cell growth, and what Brandon and Oliver had received prior to their stem cell transplants to me. Remarkably, that was enough to get my immune system charged up, begin countering the fire of the hole, and the flesh-eating disease seemed to halt. Contrary to what my parents had been told, I left the ICU fog about 2 weeks after arriving, was transferred back to Unit 57, the bone marrow transplant unit, with a long way to go in healing, but alive. It's amazing what they do in ICU. Keep people alive long enough to get them over the very unstable slope of the edge of life and death. ICU patients try to stay present long enough to get to the life side of the slope, and their family and friends try to survive the insanity, hope and pray that they get to leave ICU with their loved ones alive. Every day, everyone wins some and they lose some. It's a miracle I got to leave the slippery slope. When I entered Unit 11, Neuro Ward, on April 15, 2017, I was assigned to a room with a roommate. It was almost impossible to accept that I was there because I had 5 tumors lurking in my brain. While I waited for the neuro team to come up with the best plan, I did laps around the unit and ate as much food as I could to keep strong. The doctors had immediately prescribed the steroid dexamethasone, Dex as I call it, which was successfully controlling the tumors. I was a bit concerned about experiencing a mental effect similar to when I was on prednisone a few years back, but there was really not a lot of other better options given the tumors in my brain. During my laps, I noticed the unit had 2 distinct sides to it. There were frequently changes on the unit. I had about 6 different roommates during the week or so before surgery. My laps confirmed that the rooms on the scary side were for patients much sicker than those on the good side. On the scary side, there were glass walls and doors, and no clocks, telephones, or washrooms in those rooms. Dex did a great job of holding back the tumors long enough for the team to determine the best surgery and radiosurgery plan. About 9 days after admission, I had an occipital craniotomy, where the surgeon cut into my skull and tried to remove a couple of the largest tumors. It took a while, starting late in the afternoon and finishing 9 hours later. After what seemed like an eternity in recovery, they wheeled me back to a room on the scary side of Unit 11. I had 30 staples in the back of my head, but the more frightening reality was inside my brain. I found out many weeks later that in addition to the normal temporary changes from brain surgery, I was simultaneously having a psychosis effect from the Dex. It was like living a real-life Groundhog Day, GHD, where my life would repeat every few hours for infinity. While it may not sound so bad, it actually was the scariest time of my life, even worse than ICU. So many things supported the GHD theory. Nurses were so positive that they seemed unbelievable. They did vitals, physio, and assessments every couple of hours. It was actually 6 hours in reality, including asking me exactly the same questions. What is your name? Where are you? What is the date? Repeat. The same 2 young people delivered my food with the same smile. Repeat. Mom asked if the cut fruit was fresh, and she and Tasha apologized for selecting the food. Repeat. My skepticism was endless. Something must have happened in my brain, and I was stuck forever. Dad would disagree with me, each time with the same words and smile. Repeat. The worst part of GHD was that my family and friends would also remain in my frozen state, not knowing whether I would ever recover. Over what I believed to be many weeks, I tried multiple ways to get out of the unit by leaving or calling friends, family, and even 911, but failed. I was 100% certain that unless I could get out of Unit 11 and reset my brain, I would need to die before continuing in this state. A positive mind can be dangerous when it goes rogue, especially when it is your own mind. While GHD likely sounds crazy, it was my reality. I didn't know that I was actually recovering quite well and quickly. I was discharged just over a week after surgery, but I didn't believe it was true until I touched the dashboard of Mom's car and the nightmare stopped. I cried as we drove away, and slowly the fear began to dissolve.